Welcome to the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. In each episode, we will discuss professionals serving the tech startup market and the various issues of importance to those companies. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. Now here's the host of From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, Phil Crowley.
Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for tuning into our podcast. We look to bring you leaders in the life sciences and technology who can share their perspectives on developments in those areas, how to succeed, mistakes to avoid, issues to be aware of. The idea is to try to demystify for you the process of getting your great ideas to the market, hopefully to enrich the lives of thousands or even millions of people. Today, I'm happy to have as my guest Dr. Joseph Armstrong. Joe is the Chief Marketing Officer and Global Head of Business Development for TCG GreenChem. It's part of a leading global contract research and manufacturing services company, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Joe earned a PhD in synthetic chemistry and has over 30 years experience in pharmaceutical research, development, and manufacturing. And the work of his company and his group is really very important because it's the practical way that great ideas get from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside. So I'm delighted to have Joe talk a little bit about that with you today. And also stay tuned at the end of our presentation. I'm going to ask Joe to share a couple of tips from his long experience to try to help you think about the issues you need to be concerned about and techniques that you can use to increase the prospects for success. Joe, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It was really nice to participate in your webinar today, webcast, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Super. Well, tell us a little bit about your background and the pathway that led you to your current position.
I definitely will. Just to give you one little simple background, I'm actually from the mountains of Tennessee, so you're talking to a real hillbilly right here. And so for somebody to come all the way from the mountains of Tennessee to have an opportunity to be an executive and lead research at Merck was quite the accomplishment and a dream come true for me. And currently I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here for TCG GreenChem after getting my PhD in chemistry and after 30 years in the business to create this small company now that I think I can communicate is having a major impact in the world of new therapies today.
Well, that's great because, I mean, you are the people who help the people with great ideas kind of develop those ideas so that they can wind up helping people in the practical sense. Tell us a little bit about what TCG does and how it does it, because I think that for many people, the idea of a contract development, research, and manufacturing company is kind of mystical. And so if you can demystify that for our listeners, that'd be great.
Oh, I'd be more than happy to. I'll kind of just start a little bit at the beginning. So when I joined Merck & Company back in 1990, I really had a hard time distinguishing, do I want to do medicinal chemistry where you discover the molecule or in process chemistry where you design the synthesis to scale it. And so I remember talking to the senior VP at Merck and I asked him, well, what's the difference between medicinal chemistry and process research? He goes, well, it's very simple. It's two words. What is the compound? Which medicinal discovery chemistry figure out what is that compound that's going to interrogate the target to effect the desired result in the disease state. Process research is where is the how you make it. How can you make it reproducible with the same impurity profile, make it robust so it's scalable, so it's less expensive, so it's environmentally benign, using green chemistry capabilities so you take out all the hazardous materials. So when I was at Merck for those 20 years, that's exactly what I did in process research. A new compound would be discovered from medicinal chemistry. It would be given to us. We would break it down in pieces like you're building a house, like the four walls, put it back together, make that compound and do it in a way that was cost effective, green chemistry, and acceleration of the compound into the clinic. So what we make at TCG GreenChem, and what I did at Merck, was you make the drug substance, the active pharmaceutical ingredient that's actually in the capsule. And then after we make that material, we give it to the formulators who put it in the capsule and a tablet, which is then what you get at the pharmacy. So what we do is supply that material to go into clinical studies, that pharmaceutical active ingredient. It goes from phase 1, 2, and 3, and eventually to the marketplace.
Joe, could you talk a little bit about traditional organic chemistry? Because I think that people who aren't involved in the manufacturing of these kinds of products don't understand the nature of some of the dangers in the old style of manufacturing pharmaceutical products involved. I remember I was had the opportunity to visit a manufacturing facility for Johnson and Johnson, one of the company that I worked for 30 years in Ireland, and they were very stringent about making sure I didn't have any electronic devices that could potentially spark. I had to leave my cell phone back in the office of the manager. Why was that? Why did people have to be so stringent about that?
Well, it's very simple. Most of the chemistry that we do are in large vessels when you go to the manufacturing. And those vessels have solvent. That solvent is extremely flammable. And so any kind of static discharge or any time of open flame, or sometimes just the solvent being compressed, released to air, it can spontaneously combust. So for those reasons, everything has to be really critically monitored, that there's no cell phones. Everything has to be grounded anytime you're charging anything or putting any kind of solvent or reagent into a huge vessel. Remember, these vessels are three stories tall and about 20 feet wide. So these are
Wow.
huge vessels that do the chemistry. And so the operators are in suits. They're wearing respiratory masks to make sure everything is safe. They have to add everything in a safe way, calculate it, make sure everything is properly set up so you don't mischarge anything, because that can lead to different kinds of chemistries or lead to what's called an impurity profile, because you don't want impurities in that final drug that you make, because that gives deleterious side effects, could. And so that stringency, which is mandated by the FDA, is called current good manufacturing practices. Every pharma company has to follow that directly. And once you write that procedure up, you cannot deviate from that. And that's how you maintain the purity and the specific molecule that you're making, and what's called the particle size, which is critical, so that you reproduce at every single time that goes to the patient.
Boy, that's a lot of detailed work. There must be a lot of documentation that goes into that.
Well, absolutely. So one of the things everyone talks about is regulatory efforts and regulatory standard operating procedures, SOP. I mean, a pharma company, specifically in a facility that's making the drug, can have almost 1,000 SOPs. So making sure people train on those properly, make sure they're implemented as per the SOP, standard operating procedure, so there's no digressing from what that process is extremely important. And that's why you hear what's called 483 sometimes, and a company has to stop making a drug. A lot of times that happens in the generic world because they didn't follow the procedure they had documented to the FDA. And that way you cannot determine if the purity is going to be what it's supposed to be. So following those guidelines. So regulations are important. Do we have too many? Yes. Can we streamline them down? Absolutely. And that's one of the things we as a company, and in my former years, we would do that consistently, look at it, minimize, make sure they can implement it properly, and so they're the best that can be.
All right, Joe, just for the benefit of our audience, many of whom will not be familiar with the FDA practice. As a former FDA lawyer, I got to deal with what Joe referred to as a Form 483. When a pharmaceutical plant is inspected by the FDA, the United States Food and Drug Administration, and they find conditions that are deviations from good manufacturing practices, they'll write up a statement of observations. It's on a form 483. And so when you are a pharmaceutical manufacturer, you want to minimize and eliminate receiving Form 483. Some can be so serious that they can actually shut down a pharmaceutical plant, which will cut off the ability of a company to supply that. And so, as Joe was speaking about it, the importance of having written procedures, and even more important than that, following those written procedures is a key part of good manufacturing practices, which allows a company to create something that's going to be consumed by humans. But even on top of that, the thing that impresses me about TCG, Joe, is you not only try to do that, but you try to do that in a way that's more sustainable. And sustainability is an issue that gets a lot of press these days. And can you help me understand and help our audience understand what's the impact of finding less toxic ways or more sustainable ways to create products?
Great question. So in our name, TCG GreenChem, we practice those principles of green chemistry. And there was a famous book written around like 1999 that talks about these 12 principles of green chemistry, specifically to reduce the number of steps on how you make something, to reduce the amount of waste that's generated, to remove hazardous chemicals like chromium or other things that can be very toxic, not only to the soil and into the water, that can be toxic to humans. You also want to use what's called catalyst, a very small molecule or amount of a molecule you put into a big reactor so it runs the chemistry over and over at very, very low loading, very high purity, very high yield. You want things that go to 99% yield or 100% yield if possible, because that gives you the most bang for your buck. And that's what we're always trying to strive to do. And also, when you reduce all that waste, you actually can how a compound be much less expensive, which everyone wants to have drugs less expensive. So those green chemistry principles are sustainable in how you actually make the molecule the very first time. So the practice that we use is called first time right line of sight. The first time you make the molecule, make it with the best principles that you can, with the least amount of waste, remove all those hazardous materials, and then you continue to make it every time as you go to a kilo for phase one, 10 to 40 kilos phase two, 50 to 100 to 1,000 kilos phase three, and then to the marketplace. So each one of those steps, green chemistry plays a vital role in that process being sustainable. And the other thing that we've taken on, just a quick note, is we are bringing manufacturing back to this country, which is critical for make sure our strategic stockpile is maintained. And that is being done by sustainable chemistry. There's a couple of things I'll say about that later when we get into, what is the innovation that we do and how critical that is to support the U.S. Pharma market.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the programs that you have in place to stimulate and support innovation internally, because it sounds like the work that you do is really taking a process that may be fairly basic and that doesn't really look at sustainability principles and sort of really tune it up in a special way so that it can operate much more efficiently in a much less costly way, and one in a way that doesn't stress the environment so much. Do you have any formal programs for that, or is each particular project a unique case?
Great question. So there are, as I highlighted, there was a book that talked about the 12 principles. So those 12 principles can be applied to every single project. The solutions are different, but the principles are the same. So for example, if you're doing a chemistry and it has cyanide in it, you will want to remove the cyanides. So you may be able to replace it with what's called a carboxylic acid, something that's very benign. So change in reagents can be very critical to minimize that waste. So you change how you make the compound. The other key thing about sustainability are the new technologies, and I'm glad you highlighted that. So we do a technology which is really a disruptive technology that's come into the pharmaceutical world not that long ago, like the last 5 to 10 years, and that's called continuous flow chemistry. So as I mentioned, when we make materials the way we've always made materials in pharma, these gigantic vessels, 3 to 4 stories tall, 20 feet wide, and they have a big stir bar and a big
Mhm.
arm that sticks down and stirs it. Very rudimentary. However, now we're creating continuous flow chemistry, which you have a barrel of reagent and another one of reagent, and you pipe them together in a tube, and it goes in that tube and goes around for a certain amount of time. And when it comes out of that tube, it becomes pure product. So now you have a skid the size of a car, and you can make metric tons of material from that versus these gigantic vessels, which take tremendous amount of heat. Is so expensive electricity to run those. It is kind of scary because you have everything in one big vessel. If something goes wrong and it explodes,
Ooh,
complete horrific experience, obviously. But in a continuous flow process, the reactor is only like this big. So if anything happens, you stop the pump. Everything is pumped through that reactor. You
mhm.
stop the pump. Very small amount of material, no chance for any explosion that can cause any kind of harm. So a huge advance in how we do chemistry, that's called continuous flow chemistry, and that is a great way of sustainability and actually reduces costs quite a bit. And the solvent, the liquid that's used, you can recycle that. So again, even a more cost efficient manner of recycling some materials that we use.
Oh, that is great. And I want to get onto another aspect of innovation as well, Joe, but I'd like to take a moment here to introduce our audience to Crowley Law. We are a boutique firm of very experienced lawyers who are passionate about helping life sciences and other technology entrepreneurs avoid being taken advantage of as they pursue their dreams, to take great ideas from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside or from the garage to the marketplace to enrich the lives of thousands or even millions of people. I'm a former research physicist. I did my work in superconductivity, and I understand and have experienced how hard it is to create new knowledge. So I have tremendous respect for you innovators out there and those who may not be technical innovators, but are trying to do something new as a business. And as a corporate lawyer and a group of corporate lawyers, we understand very well how difficult it is to take even new ideas, great ideas, from the lab to the marketplace. There are many obstacles to that. And we like to help innovators like many of you out there succeed in doing that. We have a website, crowleylawllc.com, with a host of free resources that talk about the issues that come up. And I felt so passionately about this that I wrote a book. And it's available on Amazon. It's called Avoid Startup Failure. Learn the top 10 causes of failure for technology startups and how to turn them to your advantage. So please look for it. Look on Amazon for Philip P. Crowley and check out the book. And just remember, we're here to help. And Joe, getting back to you now, there's this big development affecting all of us and all industries called artificial intelligence. That must be impacting your work as well.
Yeah, it's going to make a huge difference. So one of the things I've talked about are different types of processes, how you maximize yields and et cetera. So using AI, we're able to take all the different data from the very beginning of the first experiments that we've done, and we run thousands of experiments to create a process that goes to the manufacturing. If you can take all that data and distill it down and have the big database ask questions and interrogate this type of addition rate or what happens with this reagent and get on that together can accelerate your compound into the marketplace. But more importantly, in drug development, there's so many ideas that go in from formulation to clinical supplies to clinical knowledge to the outcomes of the clinical study to DMPK to safety assessment. All these things now can be all congealed together from one huge map of data, and you can then interrogate it and learn and iterate to accelerate those compounds to the marketplace.
Well, Joe, some people have speculated that artificial intelligence will take over knowledge workers' jobs. Are you concerned about that?
Well, I think everybody to a certain extent. So unfortunately, those jobs that are more menial or not as impactive of data could be gone away, but there's going to be new jobs that are created. So what we're seeing in the business already, and we have a collaboration with a company in the world of AI called TCG Digital. It's part of one of our companies in the auspice of TCG Group. We're learning with that information, you're going to create more jobs because you have to look at the data and scientists have to interrogate the new data. There's so much more
Mhm.
information. How do you assess it? How do you critically evaluate it? AI gives you a platform, but it's still going to be the human mind to make the final decisions on what's best. And also creativity. AI doesn't generate creativity. The human mind can only do that. So I think there's a huge opportunity by leveraging what we have, not being afraid of the future and embracing it in a way that we can drive it, with even more acceleration for medicines to the people.
Well, I like your analogy with acceleration because when people kind of walk around with their hair on fire about artificial intelligence, I like to remind them that, if you were a worker in a buggy whip manufacturing company in 1903, I mean, you were happily working away. But if you didn't develop, and those companies sort of went away or were greatly decreased by 1923. But many of those people and more learned different skills and became workers at automobile factories. And so it's not as if technology uniformly destroys jobs on a net basis, but it does change jobs. And so you have to, if you can learn new skills, you can thrive in the new environment. And we have seen technology development. And as a former scientist, I guess I'm prejudiced this way to see technology as improving the human condition. And what you're doing in terms of making drugs faster and cheaper is really important, an important part of that, Joe. And Joe, could you give us an example of one of those cases where some insights that you and TCG were able to incorporate into a drug manufacturing process really had a dramatic change in the ability to produce the product or produce it at a lower cost or a quicker speed?
Absolutely. So we use a technique that's called catalysis. And as highlighted before, catalysis, a small amount of a reagent that you add to a larger reactor or a larger volume of material, and it catalyzes the reaction. So a little bit tags the reaction, the reaction goes on and on without adding any extra reagent. That catalysis work we've done many, many years, not only in my previous history at Merck, but also internally. So we create our own new catalyst. So one example is we had a process that came to us, and they wanted us to just take what's called the racemic mixture and separate it. A catalysis is asymmetric. So what that means is we can make the one compound much faster than taking the other compounds and separating them. So instead of being a 6-month program, we did it in 2 months, and we accelerated that compound into the clinic through innovation. We're a contract innovator organization, such that that compound got into the clinic 2 to 3 months faster, and therefore that stock of that company went from 5 to 15 fold higher within 6 months. And that's what innovation can do. And more importantly, maintaining that innovation of that technology, the catalysis chemistry, allow that compound to go into phase 2 and is currently in phase 3, and we'll see what happens. And that is actually a compound for oncology.
Oh, that's extremely important because the sooner you can get a new therapeutic out into the marketplace, the sooner you can help uh, cure patients, arrest the progress of the disease, and provide real practical benefits. Do you have an example of a case where one of your clients decided not to take your advice and had to redo some things?
Well,
Those happen too, I'm sure.
it happens quite a bit, and a lot of times clients have worked with other vendors, and those vendors had failed to make that compound, and they've had to come to us because of our innovation can solve that problem.
Mhm.
But I mean, I can think of many examples where things the client didn't really take our advice. And one example was we were making a compound, and we want to do a very specific understanding of the solid state of the final material, and
Mhm.
that's called the solid state chemistry. And
Right.
we offered to do that work for our client, but they refused to have it done. And then 4 months later, when they got to making the final compound, they couldn't make it. So they had to come back to us, and then we had to do that work, and it delayed their project by 2 months.
Mm.
So understanding the development part when you start a project with that knowledge allows you to streamline first time right line of sight. And it was unfortunate that the client didn't take that on, but now we do that with them very early so they can really accelerate that compound into the clinic and beyond.
Well, Joe, it sounds like you're very enthusiastic about this kind of work. What do you like most about what you do?
Well, I think I'm one of the most blessed people in the world because, as scientists, what I've done with my own hands, I make the drug that goes directly to a patient. With my own hands, what I've done in the lab. And I've done that on many projects at Merck, and we've done that on many, over probably 100 projects here at TCG GreenChem over the last 7 years.
Mhm.
There's no greater feeling of accomplishment and purpose of being able to do that to help people. And I've been fortunate, some of the drugs that I've worked on has helped my own family members. So how rewarding is that? And so being able to make molecules with innovation, to drive it earlier, to minimize costs, to get to patients, to help them fight their battles, that's what we're based on. And that's what really lights me up about my job.
Well, that is great, Joe. All right, Joe, as I promised our audience, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share some advice on things to do, things not to do. And I know with your vast experience in large companies and small companies, you have some insights into personal development. And that's a really important part of being successful as a startup entrepreneur. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to uh, give our audience a couple of things to think about and take away from our discussion today.
Well, fantastic. And I'll give you three quick little pointers, not just two. The first one is when you're going to take on a company, and my great mentor, Roy Vagelos, used to be the CEO of Merck and Company. He was talking to me, and I said, well, I'm thinking about a new opportunity. He goes, well, Joe, sometimes you have to jump off the cliff and know you're going to land okay. You don't know exactly what the landing pad is, but you have to have confidence in yourself and jump off of that. And every time he did that, he was extremely successful. So that's what I was able to do to help build this company with Chris Saniaka, who's the founder and CEO of TCG GreenChem. We've been very fortunate. The second thing to think about is you're always going to be under pressure and things are going to happen. You're not going to expect something to happen in the business perspective, an investor, from the project that you run. The most important thing to do when something happens, you stop, you look, you listen, you don't react. So many times, all the pressure that comes on, we want to react and fix the problem, but you need to stop, listen to what's going on, investigate, and then move forward and make a decision on how to solve that problem. So you stop, look, and listen. The third thing, just really quick, it's all about people and creating relationships. Any company, any success, whether it's your clients, your employees, the people that come and do the landscaping at your facility. It's all about creating relationship and have them all pull together to do and deliver the same thing, which is to help people, right? And so one of the key things is make sure you have a culture, or make sure you understand developing relationships to create that family unit, that team unit is what will drive your success.
Super. Those are great points to consider. Thanks very much for those, Joe. And thanks for your sharing your perspectives throughout this. I'm sure our viewers and listeners are going to want to know how to get in touch with you if they have a manufacturing or development project for a chemical where you and TCG might be able to help them. How can they get in touch with you if they want more information?
Well, it's very simple. You can just go directly to our website, www.tcggreenchem.com. And also, you can contact me directly. My email is joseph.armstrong@tcggreenchem.com, all one word. So I'm more than happy to talk to anyone, share my experience. We've had many clients come and tour our facility, which is absolutely spectacular here outside of Princeton. And we'd be more than happy to have further conversations any way that I can help answer any questions I may have raised in this webinar today.
All right, Joe, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your perspectives. And I hope you, our viewers and audience, have gained some additional perspectives on this part of the development process. And I'd also like to remind you and urge you again, go out to Amazon.com, take a look at our book, Avoid Startup Failure. It's gotten some great reviews. And also, if you enjoyed this discussion, please click on the link below and subscribe to our podcast to hear more about the process of taking great ideas to the marketplace. And I want to wish you tremendous success in the work that you're undertaking. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Phil. Happy holidays, everyone.
You've been tuning into the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe, like, leave a positive review, and share with others.